So one of the topics that I was curious about, anybody who's watched the show any length of time knows that I'm a big test person, a big believer in tests and TDD and do your test, do your test, do your tests. Couple of questions on that front. A, how much time do you find yourself spending on tests on the PageM versus the code? And B, do you see tests as being more or less or the same importance to OSS than they are to a private code base?
Yeah. Well, I would say, well, for one, like Pay has, yeah, I don't believe in testing. So there you go. Thanks, Andrew. um, it is payments for Pay. So I'm very concerned about having it well tested. What we end up doing is what's nice is that everybody has some sandbox environment, so we can actually just run real tests against a real API. So we actually use VCR to record all the HTTP requests, because ideally I can just delete all the cassettes and hit the real sandbox API. We can test everything and know for real that Stripe's API didn't change or Braintree's API didn't change, and we'll be all solid. So that is important, that we test all of the, you make a subscription, we want to make sure that the webhook comes in and creates the subscription in the database and gets processed correctly. And, it's payments. So it's very, very thorough. We have a lot of tests in there. It is trickier because we're interacting with all these APIs. So the VCR cassettes and things really make that possible, but they're also just a huge pain. Anytime you're like, well, we include this. I went through and did a bunch of this recently where we had the Stripe stuff being expanding these associated records. So if you grab a Stripe charge, you can find the invoice ID normally, but you can tell it to expand the invoice, and then you will get the invoice included in that response. So we have these VCR cassettes, and I change a parameter like that, and it's like, we don't have a recording for that request because you changed the URL just slightly. So we got to go delete those and then rerun them and kind of make sure we filter out the API keys and whatnot. I have a separate account for the sandbox. So the API keys I know have leaked, but it's also the sandbox stuff. So it's kind of okay, I guess. But yeah, it is a thing where you want to make sure that your interface is set, your tests check for regressions and everything like that. Colin and I were just fiddling with the regression on Turbo earlier, where delete Turbo stream HTML elements started requiring a template inside, and they never did before, and just broke stuff. And so you need tests for those things, because people are going to be real confused when a regression comes through and you didn't catch it. So
But you'll be happy to know they're looking at it as we speak. So,
yeah, we actually found a couple days ago they fixed that issue on Turbo, which is good. So, but yeah, that is one where I feel like in some cases, you're fiddling with a new idea for an open source project. Don't worry too much about the tests or whatever. You're trying to figure out, how should this look and feel and work at the beginning? But your users should know that it's not really quite solid where it needs to be. But then once you start to figure that out, you should really take the time and be thorough about it, because you don't want a new feature to go back and break other stuff, which happens all the time. When you get unsolicited PRs, I gotta fix this thing to add this feature, and it's breaks something else, then yeah, you're gonna be in trouble, because you're gonna end up releasing that version, and then a bunch of people are going to upgrade and complain, and you took down production for me and whatever. You don't want to be responsible for that. So it's nice to be as thorough as you can on it. But you just test that public interface, and effectively those same things are what your docs are going to show, and you're going to have hopefully examples in your tests for all those different use cases you plan to support, which is nice because I use that all the time looking at a library, go into the test and see how do they do this thing? Because the docs infer that it's possible, but there's no examples. So it's always good to see those in your test suite. So
Yeah, devs I've noticed aren't always the best document writers. We have a tendency to not like to do that.
yeah, and like with pay, it's just things change a lot, and it's really hard to take all that time to go back and like, well, we have 50 pages of documentation. Like, what even does this affect? I don't want to have
Right.
to read through all 50 pages again and just check every single one. So it can be tough, but you can also get into a bit of a habit with I write the PR, I update the changelog in the PR, I try to also update the docs as well, and then hopefully maybe your PRs can be a more all encompassing of this is the change in its entirety as opposed to here's the change log and a separate commit for, half the docs and there's other docs that we forgot. You can take your time a little bit more and try to do that helps, but I don't always do that.
Well, and my point of view is that's one of the big reasons I like doing very well written tests is because that is the documentation. Like you said, you go into the tests a lot in these open source, say, well, how does this work? Well, that's the documentation. It's got the examples right there. It's got what it should do. It's got everything in it. And if you write them well and think about what you're writing, you can avoid having to write a lot of docs. And they're self-updating.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And like I would love the fancy marketing site docs where it's like, Bridgetown site or something like that. That's all pretty and everything. But you know what? The markdown files in the repo is as far as we're going to get on pay for now. So,
Yeah.
it's not too bad, but it is at least easier to go and change because I can just make the commit right there and I don't have a separate project to go update and, other tooling for it or anything. We just got markdown files and they're real easy to update. Don't have to worry about CSS or anything.
Yeah.
So,
that's definitely nice. But yeah, and I have seen too, and I'm just wondering what your experience with the OSS has been. Do you get a lot of feedback on the tests themselves?
No, I don't think so. I feel like it's always about features because that's always what people care about because they're trying to build something and they're like, yeah, this doesn't work or I need this feature. I don't think I've ever gotten any things related to tests, hardly ever. Like I'm sure it's been in there where it's like, this test is flaky or whatever, some little things.
Yeah.
But in general, no, everybody seems to be concerned about I'm using your library. I'm trying to accomplish X. It doesn't work. Help me fix it. So
right. I need the thing. Give me the thing.
Yeah. Your shit's broken. And I want you to know that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.